Our speaker today is Adam Leuenberg. He's the president of Postal Advocate Incorporated. We are the only mail audit and recovery firm in the U.S. and Canada, and we manage a portfolio of over 181,000 pieces of mailing and shipping equipment for the largest U.S. companies. Adam speaks and teaches nationally on mail savings and industry trends. He is a former industry co-chair of the Boston Postal Customer Council and Mail Systems Management Association member. He is CMDSS and MDC certifications, and he's a featured writer for Mailing Systems Technology magazine. He worked for one of the largest mailing vendors for over 17 years. He was the director of national sales for Presort tabletop inserters, addressing hardware, software, and green offerings. And Adam was one of the top 5 account managers nationally, working with some of the nation's largest accounts. Postal Advocate is not affiliated with any mailing vendors, so we can offer you unbiased advice. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Michaela. So today we're going to talk about what I view as the future of mail. And the future of mail, because it's been hard, and now what we're going to talk about today is the goal is to make it easy. And hopefully you'll see that as we go through this. So what we're going to cover is the evolution of shipping and mailing, enterprise visibility, so how can we gain access to the details, web access, cloud-based shipping and mailing solutions that can support a blended workforce. And there's sort of 3 iterations of this. It's standalone PC postage, enterprise PC postage for across an enterprise, multi-carrier enterprise shipping and mailing tools, which can do combined UPS and FedEx plus mail. Inside that, we're going to talk about rate shopping aspects, address validation, single sign-on. What do you need as far as centrally managing these types of platforms? Case management, how do you handle locations and user questions? And then best practices and tips. So let's talk about the history of mail, right? And the purpose of this is to show you that, and where I'm going to is, over the last 10 years with this web technology, it has changed the future direction of mail in I think a more drastic way in the last 10 years than has happened in the last 100. And let's talk about what that is. 1840, the postage stamp comes out. 1920, the first postage meter. We're 100 years since the first postage meter came out. Parcel register was for doing like a postage meter for UPS and FedEx. Parcel manifest was an electronic scale-based system that allowed you to print a UPS label. Parcel manifest moved on to a PC in the early 90s, so you could actually type out like a computer manifest for all your shipments and generate labels. PC Postage came out in 1999. Enterprise versions of PC Postage came out in 2007. But then when things moved to the web in 2011, for Parcel Manifest, for PC Postage, and for this enterprise web-based tools, it has just changed the future opportunity of mail, and I think in an incredibly dramatic way, and we'll talk about the reasoning as we go through this. So the first thing is, when you're looking at your organization, you have to say, where do my mail streams come from? And they come from one of these 5 places. So you have home and small office mail that probably go to the post office and buy stamps. You have permanent accounts, direct relations with the Postal Service. You have mailing equipment and postage, that you run, postage meters, and they have postage that are funneling through those postage meters. You have outsourced mail spends where you outsource things to a mail house or a printer who's doing mailings on your behalf. Or you have expedited document and parcel shipping. So you have your UPS, your FedEx, your Postal Service, shipments that you might be managing. That's it. Everything that people mail falls into one of these categories. So what we're going to focus on today is the enterprise mail and shipping model, which really hits the home and small office, the mail equipment and postage, and this expedited document and parcel shippers. And then everything else is really outsourced. And so we're really focusing on the mail that's done, the mail and shipments that are done inside your organization. So this is a weird concept, but see if you can follow me. Why is it easier for a company to send a $10 overnight than a 53-cent letter? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It should be easier to send a postage stamp, like a letter through a postage, through the Postal Service than it should be to generate a UPS or FedEx. But when you think about this and you dive into the elements that are involved, it's not. And in many cases, people drive to what's the easiest, and they will generate those $10 overnights because it's easier. So let's talk about the reasons. So first off, UPS, FedEx, they start at about $10. You might have a rate that's slightly less because you're a huge company, but when you factor on fuel surcharges and all the different surcharges, $10 is kind of where packages kind of start versus 53 cents for a letter. So what we're talking about is UPS and FedEx versus the Postal Service today versus what we're going to propose for a future state of the Postal Service in your organization. So the first is, today, when you do UPS or FedEx in an organization, there's usually one standardized process that most people follow. You might have some production work streams that go through a warehouse or something like that, but most people are going to using free UPS and FedEx tools like Campus Ship, UPS.com, FedEx.com. They'll have all your account numbers linked into it. And then you'll have basically consolidated reporting and dashboards that you can get from the carriers that give you the visibility. But everyone throughout your organization goes to a website for that carrier and generates their packages in basically the same way. Now let's compare that to mail. So some offices, it varies by technology. Some offices have postage meters or PC postage. Some offices go to the post office to purchase stamps. Majority of the users aren't going to have access, especially if they're working at home, to any sort of metering technology, so they'll buy stamps. What we're proposing is having uniform web access for postage the same way you have it for UPS and FedEx. So where can companies mail? So if you break down mail, it's usually one of these three categories. You have your large corporate offices. Frankly, they're going to need a postage meter, a mailing system, because they do a high enough volume that it's going to justify having it. They're going to need feeding and sealing capabilities. But then you have other company locations, smaller locations, and then you have remote workers. Do they really need a postage meter to do 3, 5, 10, 15 letters a day? Or could a web solution that could print postage stamps be sufficient? So what we find is that most of those people are either buying expensive metering technology or they're going to the post office and purchasing stamps. Both have their downsides, which we'll go into. All of that can be done through uniform web access the same way we do UPS and FedEx. Now think of the other benefits, visibility. So with UPS and FedEx, you have visibility to every single package that gets generated, including the tracking numbers, the cost, the accessorial fees. Nobody has that with mail. If you have postage meters, you know that an office filled for $100, but you don't know who used it, what classes of mail, was there any theft? You don't know those things. If with uniform web access of postage, you have complete visibility on consolidated invoices and dashboards to every single piece of mail that was generated, who generated, what time, what class, and every piece is visible to a way that you never got the visibility through whether they're buying postage stamps or using meters. Funding. So with UPS and FedEx, you pay after use. So you ship the packages, and then you get an invoice from the carrier for what you used. With the Postal Service, you typically prepay. You either go to the post office and buy stamps up front, you load your meter with $100 of postage. Those are prepaid items. Even if you're getting a bill for what you use from the vendor, you still had to prepay the funds before you use them onto those meter devices. In a future state, it would be pay after use. Chargeback. With UPS and FedEx, you get a consolidated billing, you can allocate it by cost centers, you can upload charges. There's no way to do that with postage meters, or buying stamps in the post office. It's incredibly fragmented. Most companies have zero visibility to their total spends across an organization. So with a web-based platform, everything's allocated internally the same way it would be done for UPS and FedEx. So you can see, today, these are the reasons it's easier in some cases because someone doesn't have the technology available to I'm just going to send it UPS or I'm just going to send it FedEx. When really that's a terrible decision because it costs 20 times more than a 53-cent letter. Not every piece has to be delivered overnight. So PC postage is the fastest growth segment of the mailing industry. And the reasons is it's inexpensive compared to postage meters. Typically costs in the range of $10 to $30 a month per location. It's cloud-based. It can be accessed from any device, easy to deploy and use. Within a week or two, you receive login credentials, a scale and starter supplies. There's simple online tutorials to get you started quickly. There's visibility to all history and package tracking statuses of every single thing that was ever done. Some systems have multiple carrier options for UPS and FedEx, and there's significant postage savings. The savings are so big that many of the newer mailing postage meters are actually including PC postage options with them in order for you to be able to get these savings. So let's talk about what these savings are. So first off, if you go to the post office to buy a stamp, it's 58 cents. If you use a postage meter or PC postage, it's 53 cents, saves 9%. So all those users who work out of their houses or who have offices where you don't have metering technology, they're all paying, and they're buying stamps, they're paying 9% more for that, for buying stamps, not to mention not having the exact denominations and all those sort of things. Certified mail. A lot of PC postage solutions will have electronic return receipt options for their certified mail built in, which saves $1.25. For parcels, and this is the big one, anything that's a first-class parcel, Priority Mail Express, save on average 15 to 20% less because you're using commercial rates versus retail rates. You're generating a 4x6 shipping label like you would for UPS or FedEx, submitting the transaction, and for that, the post office gives you a discount. Postage meters don't have that inherently. PC postage forces the user to do it that way to get the savings. So how does it work? So it's the most common remote mailing solution. It's usually a subscription model, so you'd pay a monthly fee. You print from any computer with an internet connection and a printer, so there's no real hardware that you need. So if you're printing shipping labels, 4x6 shipping labels, you'd either print them on regular paper and then tape it to your item. You could use Avery label stock that you could get at any supply store and peel it off and put it on. For postage stamps, you could either print directly onto the envelope with the, not only the postage amount, but also the destination address and the return address. You can pick which ones you want to print. Or what most people do is they use stamp sheets, which are these sheets you would get from the mailing vendor. Each sheet has a serial number, and then you enter that serial number into the application and say, I want to print 5 stamps. And then because you entered that serial number, the system will remember that you printed the first 5 stamps. And so the next time you use this sheet, it starts at the 6th position. Makes it very easy to use all your stamps. And some people use vendor-provided label printers. Most people, I would say 90 to 95% of the people who use PC postage print on postage stamp sheets. And the reason is couplefold. One, it's easy. It's simple. The sheets are relatively inexpensive. Most people aren't comfortable printing on envelopes on their local printer. How do you feed an envelope into a printer is not a uniformly known thing. Some people are better than others, but anyone can feed a sheet into their printer. And the label printers are just not necessary because they limit you to only being able to print from that particular computer versus being able to share the application, to people in lots of different areas. The next iteration is cloud-based. So what we just discussed is a single license of PC postage. So what enterprise versions are is they're grouping those single sites together into a group in order to be able to do different things. So it's the same as standard PC postage. The main difference is how multiple locations can be controlled under one central administration license. So that central administration license has the following benefits. Simplicity onboarding new users. You can add users from the application, you can remove users. Reporting on all locations and activity from a central dashboard. You can export everyone's use, from one platform of how much postage they did and charge back internally, all from one application. You can manage your billing, subscription, supplies, postage all in one place. You can control the user access. What do you want the user to be able to do and see in the application? Some systems have single sign-on to make the login process easier. If you have more than 10 locations using PC postage, we strongly recommend having an enterprise license. It just makes it so much easier, and you can control the users and you control use. You can't do that when there's a bunch of single sites sitting around where you have to reach out to each individual location in order to get any detail on their use. So let's give an example of a client. And this is a real life example of where PC postage makes sense and what are some of the cost savings. So this company has 10 high volume machines that cost $40,000 a year. They have 50 convenience meters, which are just low end machines that are designed to handle day-to-day mail volumes, spending $50,000. And they have 10 PC postage licenses for $2,500, and they're purchasing stamps at the post office at 130 of their offices. So they have 200 locations spending $92,000 a year on equipment. The future model that we would say is these 10 high volume machines can probably be right sized down to 3, which would cost about, go from 40 to 10,000. The convenience meters can go from 50 to 10. Most of those convenience meters could be handled on PC postage. So it goes from 50,000 to 6. And then the PC postage, we can put uniform licenses for the rest of the locations, 187, at 22,000. And our costs go now from $93,000 to $28,000, saving almost 70% or $64,000 a year. And 130 of the offices that didn't have any ability to generate postage besides go to the post office to buy stamps now have access. There are some additional benefits. The metered mail, the items that's going through a postage meter are probably not getting the retail rates on their parcels, which is a 15% savings. So at $120,000 of postage spend, at a 3% savings, it's about $3,600 a year. I use 3% because the majority of the volume is going to be letters, which don't get that savings. But for the commercial packages, the priority mail, that sort of thing, we use 3% as a conservative estimate. Anybody who's buying stamps at the post office, there's at a minimum of 10% savings using PC Postage. You get 9% savings by just using the metered rate, which goes from 58 to 53 cents, not to mention the commercial rates above. So that's an extra 52, that's an additional 3,900. Plus, this company at 130 locations was doing an average of about 6 trips to the post office per year per location. If you put a number of $10 a trip, that's $5,200 a year in just trips to the post office, not to mention the liability and the time lost of sending workers to the post office in vehicles. So in total, $77,000 of savings, 83% off just what they were paying before on their mailing costs. Additional value are there's a simplified standardized method for generating postage across the entire enterprise. Everybody does it the same way. Support work from home users. People, even though COVID seems to be lessening in its severity, people aren't going back to work in offices every day at every company anytime soon. People really liked working from home. And even if companies go back to work, they're still going to have some remote workers. Central reporting structures for all mail spends, ability for users to print stamps on demand wherever they are versus having to make that decision. Should I just send it UPS or FedEx? No, I should send it for 53 cents, not $10. And then the ability to use single sign-on to control users and make sure only active users are sending mail from your organization. The next iteration is multi-carrier enterprise mail and shipping. So it's similar to PC Postage, but it's more focused on shipping. So it has more robust rate shopping between carriers and service levels. This can do UPS, FedEx, DHL, Postal Service. It can compare rates on all of them at once. You can create rules that can be enforced on these systems. As an example, only director levels have the ability to do 8:30 a.m. shipments because of the additional $25 in cost, or intercompany shipments to a known facility, default to 2-day or ground levels based on what's the lowest cost, and that's going to get there in 2 days or less. Improved user management reporting options. There's a lot more reporting and analytics that can be done. Single sign-on is easier to get set up on these platforms, and some of the systems, at least especially the ones we recommend, provide the option to print postage stamps and do shipments on the same platform. So let's talk about rate shopping. Rate shopping is the #1 reason to have one of these enterprise mail and shipping platforms combined. So rate shopping is a vague topic. I'm sure you've heard it in your travels. It'd be nice to be able to rate shop between, maybe FedEx is your prime carrier and you'd like to rate shop between FedEx and the Postal Service or FedEx to UPS. But let me tell you where the main areas that people see value in rate shopping. So the first is to compare air to ground to guaranteed ground service. So let's take a next day air standard that's in zone 2, and a 1 pound is $9.01. Well, UPS ground or FedEx ground guarantee next day delivery in zone 2. So the ground shipment, instead of $9.01, is $7.96, saving $1.05. Now it's guaranteed delivery. These two are going to get there at the same time. Not to mention some things that everyone just ships next day air priority, which is 10:30 delivery, may not need 10:30 delivery. Maybe end of day guaranteed is sufficient. Also, if you're sending something 2-day and something's going out 2-day at $10.65, well, that would get lower. That it would get the same delivery versus ground at $7.96. If something's going 3-day to zone 4 at $9.09, it's getting the same delivery at $7.96, sending it ground, but less money. Consider the USPS for lightweight residential or rural zip codes. If you're sending a UPS or FedEx, and let's just even say you're sending ground, and you're sending ground and it's $7.96, and you say, I've got a 75% FedEx discount, and it's going to be the best rate. And look, the post office is $7.40, so I like the tracking and the guarantees of the postal of FedEx, so I'm going to keep sending it FedEx. But if it's going to a residence, you get an extra $5 residential fee. If it's to a rural zip code, which is 61% of all zip codes out there are considered rural zip codes, you get a delivery area surcharge, which ranges from $3.25 to almost $6, plus 9% for fuel, plus if there's an address correction, it's $18. So that basically that $8 ground shipment is now, going to a residence is now $14. If it's to a rural zip code, it's now $17 to $18, plus fuel is $18 to $19 versus the Postal Service, which is $7.40. And this is the reason why it's so important to make these distinctions, to have this stuff displayed on a screen so people can make informed decisions with all the costs put together. The post office also has a unique avenue where for lightweight items less than a pound, there's a first-class parcel service, which has the same tracking, 4x6 shipping labels, same visibility that you would have for priority mail, but the rates start at like as low as $3. And so it's a great option if you're sending lightweight items to residents. If it's all business to business and it's all in urban centers, absolutely FedEx and UPS are the only game in town. But if you're falling in that criteria, lightweight, residential, or rural zip codes, Postal Service should be considered, or a lot of really lightweight items, the post office should be considered. Address validation. These platforms have the ability to validate the addresses up front, and the validation can be a couple things. It can validate the entire address, it can make sure the address is a deliverable address, and it can also validate if it's a residential shipment or not, and automatically put those residential flags in. But having control of your addresses is an important thing. This is an example from a client. The issue is that the carriers charge $18 for every address correction. And oftentimes the same address is charged this fee over and over again because it's not edited in the database. So these web-based tools allow you to have visibility to which items got address corrections, clean them up front where you can, and the ones you can't, to clean up the databases that everyone's using and sharing. So this doesn't happen. So if you look at this, they had 1,058 address corrections. 647 of them were only one time, but the remaining, 400, they ship multiple times to the same addresses, getting that $18 fee over and over and over again. The goal is to lower these fees and have a process where there's a communication with the people that get the address corrections to make sure that they can clean up their databases for the future. And that takes some oversight. Single sign-on. Since most companies rely on free carrier-provided tools, UPS Campus Ship, UPS.com, FedEx.com, or Ship Manager, those systems do not have single sign-on. So it requires an administrator to manage the passwords. And so what happens, the challenge is when users leave, does anyone have a process for going back into those carrier-provided systems and getting the users out of there? If they don't get them out of there, then what happens is those users can still ship on the company because they still have access through the web to their old carrier account numbers. It's a liability to have those users still with access, and most people just don't think of this particular category. Also, when new users join the company, it's usually a manual process to set them up. So these new enterprise web tools have single sign-on to make this easy. So there's usually a common field that's used to set it up, like an email address or an employee number, and that's the linkage. It clicks your Active Directory, it's set up with IT, and clicks your Active Directory and makes sure that they're a valid user, and then automatically they don't have to enter username and passwords. And because it's so easy to use the application, you get more uniform acceptance. So single sign-on on large enterprise deployments is definitely the easiest way. It usually takes a day or two to work with IT to get them to get these systems implemented. But other than that, they're very simple. In order for these systems to work, you need a central administrator. These systems need someone controlling this system to make sure that deployments go successfully. So, and if without that, these systems just won't work. And so we do this type of central administration for our accounts. And so these, for our learnings, are the things that are needed. You don't have to go through a third party like us. You can certainly do it on your own. but there's certain value to having, but you need to make sure that these processes are documented and that you have the expertise in order to do these things. So here are the main steps that need central administration. First off, you have to define the requirements of what this system needs to do. You don't always want to rely on the vendor for that. You want to be in control of what the requirements are for it. Then the system has to be implemented. So you need someone on your side like driving to make sure that the system gets set up, the requirements are met, it's doing everything that it's supposed to, carrier accounts are logged in properly, cost centers are logged in, profiles are set up properly for what people can do and access. Then there needs to be a training plan that's put together to make sure that users can be put on board, frequently guides, webinars that have to be set up. Then users have to be onboarded. Usually companies don't want to get, if there's 5,000 employees, they're going to be accessing this. They don't want to get all their users on at once. They have to have like a rollout onboarding plan, make sure people have access to webinars and FAQ guides. Managing user access, even with single sign-on, people still have to be linked to specific profiles, to specific cost centers, specific locations, and that has to be managed by someone that can make sure it gets taken care of. Case and issue management. There will be questions. Users are going to have issues. You need to make sure there's a process for managing these cases. What you don't want is just telling your users, well, just call the vendor, they'll take care of it for you. The vendor's not familiar with how your system's set up. They're not the ones managing the day-to-day access of it. So you want to make sure there's someone on your side who's the first responder to those sort of issues. You need to monitor the usage levels of the system to make sure who's using it, who's not using it. Reporting on key metrics, quantifying the savings, and then expanding and promoting usage to other divisions, groups, acquisitions, things like that. So it requires someone to do this. It doesn't have to be a mammoth undertaking. It doesn't have to be someone's full-time job, but someone has to take responsibility for this in order for it to work. We find that one of the most important aspects of it is the case management aspect. So we've set up a case management system for our clients that when they're using this platform and they have questions, and they will have questions, they can hit a website, they can click a down arrow, and a customized menu comes up with what are their most common things that they need support with. They can type who they are, and then when they click next, a case is automatically set up. A case number is emailed to them. A case is emailed to our agent. And then we work directly with the end users to get those issues resolved and then document that the case is closed. This we find is really important. So whether you have a dedicated case management system like this or you have some process in place, it gets difficult to manage it just with emails going back and forth. And if there needs to be a closed loop process to make sure cases get done. So customized messages and links for common questions. Once a case is submitted, an email is sent to us to start the process. An email can be sent to the requester with a case number because they need it. We take care of the resolutions. And the important thing is all cases, activities, contacts, and notes are stored for reporting and archiving. You need that visibility to what the cases were because when you see the cases, you can develop frequently asked question guides and best practice tips that can eliminate future cases from happening because you can by educating your community. Best practice. Enterprise options should be used where possible to give you room to grow and expand. An analysis needs to be done to justify these solutions, which involves getting the details of the core data of your mailing applications. How are you mailing things today? What are the mail volumes? What are the package spends? What savings areas are available? Support may be needed to implement and promote use inside your organization. This is change management. The interesting thing is they've been doing this all along for UPS and FedEx. Your users are comfortable with this type of web technology because they're doing it every day, but it's a change in mindset from the way people do mail. Ongoing support may be needed to manage the administration aspects of the system, first responder to questions, user administration, reporting and activities and spend, billing validation of the system and usage. So you need that support model built in. So let's talk about the analysis. Only way to see if these solutions make sense is to do a detailed analysis of the spends. We've gone to thousands of organizations. I asked this one question. Do you have visibility to all your mail spends? And not one organization even has decent visibility to segments of their mail spend. It's one of those areas people just don't manage at the granular level. So our first step is to give them that level of visibility. And so that is, what is the mailing equipment and postage spends? And in order to get that, we ask, are there any current mailing vendor provided reports that you can have? If yes, that can give us a lot of detail. But still, there are typically gaps. Even if they have that, there's rogue spends, acquisitions, things that never got wrapped into a national program. So we asked for an accounts payable export of the key mailing vendor names. So what over the last year or 2 years, like what transactions have you spent for Pitney Bowes, for Quadient, FP, Stamps.com, United States Postal Service, which might be under different names like Postmaster, Post Office, USPS. So we have a naming convention that we can provide. And then we take that data and we say, and when we get the export, we say, can we get some limited copies of PDF invoices from that export, looking at one for the things we don't know about, so we can get a higher level of detail like account numbers, serial numbers, address and name of the location. And then we log that information into the vendor's websites to gain full detail. And whatever we can't get from the vendor's website, we reach out to their customer service to find out things like when do contracts expire, how much postage usage are people doing, what are the details and fees that people are spending, what are account balances. So from that detail, we can do a complete analysis of all the mailing spends. On the shipping side, we ask for 1 month of an electronic invoice from either UPS or FedEx, whatever your like your main carrier is. The file should have line item detail by tracking number and should include accessorial charges, your fuel, your residential, your all the declared values, all the different fees broken out. And from that detail, we can do a full rate shop analysis and show you where your address corrections are and like what types of savings could you've gotten through having a true rate shopping tool and an enterprise management tool of these items. Then finally, are there any current issues and challenges that we should know about in the current process? And we can typically turn these analyses around in 2 to 3 weeks at no charge or obligation to the client from the time that we get the data. So this doesn't have to be a lengthy process. It's literally giving us exporting some files, a limited group of PDF invoices, and then meet with us to review the results. And that's typically our core process. You can do that same core process if you know what you're looking for on your own, but this is the process that needs to be followed to make sure you have full visibility. In summary, more and more people are going to be working remote in the future. There is no denying that. People like working remote. I'm working remote right now. My entire team is remote. People have enjoyed it over the last 1.5 years, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. The only way to support remote workers and small offices is cloud-based tools, because nobody's going to want to put hardware in all these random places. MultiCarrier PC Postage can provide a way to mail from anywhere with an internet connection and a printer. MultiCarrier tools are available to rate shop at the lowest cost to send. And then enterprise versions are available to manage all users on a single platform. And all these solutions create efficiencies and savings. There's no way these systems don't save money based on how people are doing things today, whether it's postage savings, equipment savings, efficiency savings. The funny thing is, this sounds like it's doing something radically different because it's mail, but it's not, because everyone's been doing the exact same thing with UPS and FedEx, and many of the organizations that are on this call probably spend more money with UPS and FedEx than they do through the Postal Service in these categories. And so this isn't something brand new, it's just a different way of handling the post office. So a little bit about us. We manage the mail and shipping spends for large organizations. We've saved our clients $68 million since we started. We manage the largest fleet of mailing equipment in the world of 181,000 pieces of mailing equipment, and that includes over, I think, 10 or 12,000 PC postage licenses that we're managing today for our clients. Our average client saves 58% on the equipment side of it. We're particularly proud of that stat, and it's stayed very consistent over the years. And our average client savings has been 1.9 million. On top of that, we've helped our clients recover $24 million in lost postage from dormant postage accounts, vendor overcharges and fees, items they were being charged improperly. The majority of our team came from the mailing industry. We have 220 years of experience in the space. We know what we're talking about. We're the only ones, I believe, that do this. And that's why, we think we've been so successful in it. We have web-based tools that make the visibility an ongoing thing, that provide visibility across not just the PC postage, but the postage metering spends, permit spends, shipping spends, outsourced mail spends, whatever things you want visibility to around mail spends, we provide. And we provide time savings and assistance in managing people's fleets. Our clients are every industry. It doesn't matter, our client, because our clients are so large, we don't throw a bunch of logos at you because they all make us sign, confidentiality clauses, as Fortune 1000 companies typically do. We work with 8 of the top 15 banks, 3 of the top 10 insurance companies, 1 of the top 2 pharmacy chains, multiple in the medical spaces. Like, it doesn't make any difference, frankly, what industry it is. It's the same mailing challenge every organization has who has disparate locations and mail spends. So it's just the same thing is relevant no matter where you go. Our core process is we ask the client to sign a letter of authority that gives us the ability to reach out to the vendor on their behalf to collect this data. We ask for the items we discussed, invoice copies, if there's an equipment inventory list, specific invoices that we'll ask for. And then we work with your vendors to provide this no-cost analysis of all the mail spends, put it all together in one place. We turn this around quickly. And from this point, you could take that analysis, you can do with it on your own, or if you want us to go take care of the issues and implement the change management that we're going to propose, then we'll take care of it for you. And that's implementing credit requests, lost postage requests, get rid of fees, help you negotiate prices and catalogs. And the majority of time we spend is working directly with your end users around validating assets, right-sizing, terminating, like coming up with savings opportunities. We don't approve anything ourselves. You approve everything. The client has to approve it. We manage it in a web dashboard for ongoing, and then we provide ongoing support because clients are constantly doing things, whether they have leases that expire way out into the future, whether they have acquisitions that are happening or divestitures, or just changing mail requirements. People need support ongoing, and this is one of those spaces where, frankly, there isn't a ton of support for people, and we found that clients really appreciate this. So we do this type of educational webinars because we find that regardless of whether you need us for services or you can take some of this type of information and use it for your own good in your own organization, that's great. We're here for you if you need anything, even if it's just simple questions that you want to ask. We run these types of webinars all the time. We'll notify you of future sessions that are coming up. But we want to thank everybody for coming, and hopefully this was an informative session, and we're going to open it up for any questions.
Thanks,
Michaela,
Adam.
any questions?
Yes, we actually have 2. So the first question is, how do we get our users to adopt this technology?
Good question. So there's 2 ways to do it. One works really well, one works terribly, and one works really well. You can go to you can put a platform like this in place, and then you could say, okay, well, you have a choice of a postage meter, or you have a choice of having this. And then sites will say, well, I'm used to having a postage meter, and that's the easiest thing, and it's only a $20 to $5 savings, or whatever the number is. And then people default back to their path of least resistance, and they'll keep what they have. So that's the first way. The second way, which is very successful, is you make a corporate mandate that says, or a corporate directive that says, as a policy, locations doing less than $200 or $250 a month, and every company sets their own threshold a little bit differently, in postage, will use the enterprise web platform for postage. And anybody doing more than that has the option to get a postage meter or a mailing system. And if you do less than that and you have special circumstances, there's an approval process for you to get a meter if this doesn't work for your situation. And with that, we've done multiple, like 1,000 plus location implementations without a hiccup. People move right onto the technology and nobody thinks twice about it after they start using it. It's all the way it's framed. But in order for these systems to work well, there needs to be a directive from the top that says, this is our process as a company going forward. And the company should want that as well because they get the visibility and the controls of it, which they didn't have in the past. Good question.
Awesome. Okay, it looks like our next question is, do you work with public agencies?
Yes, we work with public agencies.
Alrighty. And then can you tell me more about the IT involvement in this?
Sure. The beauty of these systems is they're web-based. So there doesn't have to be any IT involvement at all, because if you're okay using username and passwords, then literally IT doesn't have to touch this. There's nothing that's physically implementing into your systems. The only time that IT typically needs to get involved in these systems is if you want to do single sign-on. And single sign-on, just usually there's a group in IT that works with people on single sign-on because it's becoming a more and more common thing in large enterprises. But it would need the IT team to help get the single sign-on set up.
Awesome. Okay, that looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. I want to point you to our social media icons there. We'll post about any upcoming webinars or any important information there, so you can follow us and get more regular updates. I want to thank you guys all for joining us today, and I want to remind everybody that a survey will appear at the end of the webinar, so please fill that out, and then I'll send the follow-up email shortly that'll have the presentation, so you can view that if you need. Have a great day, everybody.